One of them is the adherence to the gold standard. There's a great book, Lords of Finance by Liliquat Ahmed, about the central bankers and how they basically contributed to the Great Depression by adhering to the gold standard. And why that's interesting in this context, because so the gold standard would be, your fiat, your money had to be tied to a certain amount of gold. Well, you couldn't expand the money supply in times of crisis. And so everything just shrank, everything just collapsed in on itself. And it's what's interesting about Bitcoin is that it wants to be something like the gold standard, right? Bitcoin argues that its limited supply, only 21 million Bitcoin can ever be mined, supposedly, that will create this value. But that's a deflationary money. That doesn't work. Even if it worked the way they want it to, it doesn't work. And so it's really interesting that we're literally sort of like copying something from 100 years ago, kind of renaming it, kind of putting it through all of the tech filters that we put, social media filters, right? Selling it on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. But it's the same stuff, and they're lying to you. And I don't particularly care too much about rich people lying to each other and screwing each other over. It's not like something that animates I just don't care that much. But when it gets down to like selling your average person who doesn't have money to lose, that this is their way to emancipate themselves, to like give themselves financial freedom, it's gross. It's really gross. And the celebrities are, I think of them as the megaphone that's necessary at the end of the MLM Ponzi life cycle. Because you need more and more and more people in. At the end of it, you get the biggest megaphone you can possibly get. You get Matt Damon and LeBron James and Larry David in the frickin' Super Bowl. But as weird as that sounds, in bubbles, you usually at the end you go parabolic. At the end, it swings up like crazy, and then it crashes like crazy. And this is the crash probably you're seeing now as Bitcoin lost it's down it's down now well over 50% just in the last 6 months as inflation has geared up, and maybe more importantly, as the Fed has started to raise interest rates. People are gambling with this money, but the money, this quote unquote money, but it doesn't have any value because it doesn't do anything. And that I think is something that I've been trying to express to folks, but it's really hard because the marketing campaigns, there's so much money behind them that it's hard to kind of cut through until it starts to fall.
And
Yeah.
Sorry, Felix, go ahead.
I was just saying that the target, like every type of like MLM and scam and Ponzi has a specific target. Like there's for MLMs where there's like physical sales, it often seems to target like a type of middle class woman, like a downwardly mobile middle class woman, or like a bored woman on the second half of middle age, kind of. There are kinds that target like young men specifically. This one is, I mean, it is a great scheme of our time, because this one specifically seems to seek out middle class people who are struggling to maintain the same standard of living as their parents. They think that this is the unstated thing is like, oh, this is going to be the same thing for me as like buying a house for $20,000 was for my parents.
Right. I think it's so in fraud circles, it's called affinity fraud when you're targeting a specific group. You're targeting a specific group, easily identifiable. It could be racial, could be gender, could be age, could be the elderly are often targeted. And what you do in order to appeal to those people is you pick respected members of that community in order to shill for you. So, Tom Selleck sells you a reverse mortgage on your house, right? Or whatever. And maybe I shouldn't use the word fraud. Now I'm going to get sued by a reverse mortgage company or whatever. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like you're trying to curry favor in a specific community. And it's pretty gross because the way you do that is by taking a member from that community and sort of like getting them in on it, right? Even if most of the time they're not even aware of what they're doing, which I think has ramifications across the board, right? I mean, I don't want to say definitively they're affinity frauds, but when you look at everything from women in NFTs to, Spike Lee's commercial about, Bitcoin ATMs, the Black community, like the dialogue is very similar. The problem with all that stuff is that it's bullshit. That's the problem. The only problem is the lying, right? If it were true, it'd be great. But the problem is you're taking people who, in some cases, are living on the margins, like you said, or are comfortable-ish, but are then taking on so much risk that they're not necessarily aware of. Like the problem with Bitcoin is not that it could go up. That's cool. But the problem risk wise, if you talk to a licensed financial advisor, which I am not, is that it could go to zero, that you could lose all of your money. And not just that, the way that you buy it and stuff, I mean, you can do it in a more traditional way, but there's a lot of like, oh, you just go to this website and click on this thing, and then you do this and you do that, and then you get rug pulled, right? You've created all these intermediaries in this supposedly decentralized system, and people are just getting scammed and rug pulled. Like, forget about whether Bitcoin's going up and down. Just in the overall cryptocurrency market, of which there are like 20,000 cryptocurrencies or something like that, which is really crazy. Because if you think about it, these are securities, right? These are effectively securities. That's more than all of the listed securities in the entire US stock markets, in all of the markets. That's pretty crazy, right? And so you're just scamming people, right? You're just coming up with ways of taking their money, their real money, getting to invest in some project, which is extremely opaque. They never reveal like who owns what, or where the money's coming from. And then you're subject to the whims of whatever thing they're trying to pull off, right? And you can literally, your tokens can go from whatever value they are to, you see it all the time. You see these charts in crypto that are just absolutely insane. And you're right. I mean, I think I mean, look, to be real cynical, I think they're taking money from whoever they can take money from, right? I mean, it's like middle class people, poor people, rich people, black, white, men, women. It's gotten pretty big at this point. It at its peak was worth $3 trillion on paper. If you think of it as more of a Ponzi or an MLM, or at least a speculative bubble built off of a Ponzi or an MLM, then that's the biggest Ponzi or MLM in the history of the world by an order of magnitude.
And just one thing I've noticed recently is that a lot of the chief proponents of like NFTs and cryptos and the people who have made the most money off of it have like more or less admitted that it is a Ponzi scheme, and that's okay because someone's going to make money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And like,
SBF. Yeah, sorry.
yeah, because it's not a currency. Then it like, okay, like, well then, okay, yeah, they're like sort of embracing it. Yeah, it is a Ponzi scheme, but at the end of the day, if you're like the people who get in like the top 15% are going to make the money. And hey, like as the guy who actually you spoke to in the that's in the New York Times profile where you visited one of the Bitcoining mining operations, says to you at the end of the piece, he says, look, life's a gamble, and like all finances involve taking risks, and I'm comfortable taking risks. But like,
yeah, of course he is.
Yeah. But if this is being sold as something that is like a revolutionary new currency or like the basis of our economy, like it doesn't seem like that. It's something that is less reliable than gambling on NFL games. Like this is not just a moral disaster, but this could lead to like a true financial disaster as well.
It could. I mean, at a minimum, if I'm right, and I'm humble, can't predict the future any more than anyone else, but yeah, I see all the telltale signs of sort of. It's not as big as the good news is it's not as big as the subprime crisis. If on paper it's 3 trillion or was, and now it's like half of that already. Bless you. Now it's like 1.5. How much real money is in there? Not 1.5. I don't know how much, but there's a lot of leverage being employed. People are, speculating. There's all these like lending programs. You give your crypto to one company, and then they mysteriously, you give them the crypto, and then they mysteriously create return for you. That's like crazy return, 10%, 30% a year or whatever. So when it falls apart, I don't think this will be the thing that like takes down the entire financial system most likely. But the problem, of course, is you're sort of like, every time you say that, you kind of go, I think, I hope, because you never know until it falls, like what's connected to what.